up until the age of 40, I thought, boy, I'm a really healthy guy, in really good shape, all this other stuff and everything else. And about maybe 3 years before that, um, I I pray, and I was praying to God to say, help me understand, our clients, our elderly clients who, have all sorts of maladies. And I couldn't, it was hard for me to relate to them. I wanted more empathy. I wanted to feel more of what they feel so I could help address that when I'm coaching them, when I'm talking them through situations that are money related, but really are all about people and everything else. And all of a sudden, I go into AFib. It's now pretty common. People know about atrial fibrillation, but at the time, this is now 30 years ago, then I went to AFib. It was not very well understood or well known. And I was saying earlier to you, in the green room, is that basically I've now been in the hospital 51 times. And that all started back then with what they call cardioinversions, where they come in and zap you, and then ablation procedures, where I had 5 of those. And this happened between 1997 and 2012, most of that part of it. But about a year into having these issues with atrial fibrillation, I was sitting at my desk one day and I kind of pounded my forehead and I said, you prayed for this. This is how your prayers are answered. But it was at that point, I think I was on most people's same journey in health, like, oh, geez, how do I deal with this? And, the normal thing, let's not make it work. But then I realized, this is a gift. This is what's happened here is I've been given this gift of focusing now on what's important every single day, because I don't know how long I'm going to live. And I could do everything I can about it. And by the way, I have 2 other heart diseases. I have apical hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is a long way of saying a thickening of the heart, which is actually worse than the AFib from a mortality standpoint, and a flutter, which is another part. So I kind of got a 3B on the whole heart thing going. And because of all the stuff I've been through, there's been other issues and so forth. But what I realized was, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take a very positive route. And so for an example, what I do when I have been in the hospital, different procedures, is everybody comes in the room, I ask about their life, how they're doing today, find out more about them. And invariably, they'll say, how do you do that? How are you doing this right now? Because you're in pain and this is going on. I said, well, and the ones who are really fascinated with it, I tell them, I said, because we're talking about max life. I go, well, I have this one life to live and this is what I've been given. So I determined that the way to do this was to really focus on every day to bring value to people where I could do this, whatever they are, so that you walk in the room and you're a nurse and your life is whatever, and you probably got bad stuff going on, and I'm going to make your day good and find out more about who you are and help you on your way if I can. And if I can't, we'll just have a nice, pleasant conversation and we'll go along. And I said, what that does for me is it makes me totally forget about these maladies I have and really pay attention to you and the doctor, anesthesiologist, and the guy who pushes me around the car, and all these different folks. And I'm just having a community of people around me that I'm enjoying right now, because this is where God has placed me right now in this hospital, in this situation, and so forth. I go, I think anybody can do this, but I don't think it occurs to most people to do that. I think what occurs to them is, woe is me. I've got this terrible maladies, and so my life is horrible. But my life has gotten better and better because of that. And I think, like I said, I believe it's a gift, and it's made me really focus on, this is the pulling thing I was talking about. It's really pulls me towards this future that I live right now. So I'm really grateful that this happened to me 30 years ago, because I think I'd be totally different if it didn't.
Yeah, Gary, I'm really curious, your West Point background, right? Like there's a problem, then you strategize, right? And like, how do we conquer that hill? Like, how do we get around that? And I think that what you have gone through, I think, is amazing. And having personally experienced it, I think by the way, if you've ever been around Gary and you heard that he has all of these maladies, you would never believe it, because when you look at him, he is like, it looks like he just came from West Point, right? Everything is like, squared away. He looks like he still does PT every single morning, which
By the way, I do.
which he does. But What are three things that you think that people could use and anchor back to whenever they start feeling that woe is me, that sort of what I call it the slippery slope into that chronic unhappiness?
That's a really good question. I remember I learned that. I was a plebe at West Point. I was writing a paper. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was dead tired, just going, oh, this is awful. And then I thought, well, I'm completing my paper. But I bet you there's another plebe out there who's a heck of a lot worse than me right now. He's further behind. His paper is much, it's not anywhere near as good as mine. He's probably going to fail it. And it kind of occurred to me, you know, there's always someone out there who's in worse shape than you. And there's always someone out there who's in better shape than you. And if you don't get that lesson clear up front, you're going to go in the wrong direction. And so I've always looked at it like, yeah, I've been in the hospital 51 times and I've had all this heart disease, but I got to tell you, I've run into many, many people with the conditions I have, and they're much worse off. And I'm so grateful that I'm not as worse off as they are. And I mean physical, I'm not saying mentally. You can always find someone that's in worse shape than you. And, there's a little phrase I use all the time because I think sometimes life is, situational is, but for the grace of God, there go I. I mean, don't think just because you've got money and health and all these things you have that all of a sudden that won't happen. But enough of that's happened to me in my life. I realize, the grace of God is there and it's placed on me at certain points in time. And I take advantage of that. I'm grateful for it and so forth, but there's always someone worse off than me. And I have to remember that and get some humility and saying, you don't need to be whining about this. There's somebody much worse off than you. So quit your whining and moaning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, so that's obviously one. It's the you're living someone else's dream, even though you're living maybe not your most ideal like life at that point, right? You're always living someone else's dream. What else would you say allows you to kind of refocus back in?
Yeah. So, to your point, I think some of the fundamentals and I've done this with my team and, certain clients will want to know about this. Well, how do you keep doing what you're doing? I said, well, it's really about 6 things. Now we're getting into the regimentation part of it or whatever. I said, I've got this huge window. You want to have sunlight and you need sunlight. You need clean air. That's why we live out here where the air is clean. You need clean water. We've done lots of things to make sure our water is very clean. You need to have at least, it depends on the person, me, it's 7 hours of sleep every night. You need to exercise at a continuous basis, 6 out of 7 days. That's probably the thing I've done more than most people. I'm starting my 55th year of running. I've been running for 55 years. I'm very fortunate not to have injuries that would sideline me. But, and this morning, you're going to laugh, but I was out on the road doing push-ups and sit-ups and on my run. And I do that every single day, except for 1 day a week, with all the heart conditions I have. And most people look at like, how could they? Well, I go a lot slower, number one, but to me, that's a setup every day for getting through a really good day because your mind is sharp, you're fully rested, you're putting good food in your body. That's the 6th one. You're putting the right things in your body. You're having the right atmosphere around you, the right environment. All those things go together. It sets you up for having every day be a good day. And I think people forget about those fundamentals. Those are fundamental things.
I love that you laid out these 6 fundamental things of living the good life, right? Not even the max life, just like the good life. Because I think that you're totally right that people want to like it's the next thing, right? When I get this promotion, when I get XYZ, then I'll be happy. But I can't remember the exact quote, but I think it's James Clear that says like you don't rise to the goals, you fall to your systems and structures. It's so interesting that I think one of the big myths about what winning is and what it looks like is that it's complicated. I think the biggest myth is that being successful and winning at life is difficult because what you just articulated: sunshine, like clean air, clean water, like call it clean food, movement, right? And what was the sixth one?
Sleep.
Sleep. Like that is pretty simple.
Well, and that's why, like you said, I get this a lot from people. I'm 68 years old, and I look, well, how you don't look 68. And I go, I'm sure some of it's genes, but the other part is, if you consistently do something like that for 55 years straight, and you always exercising, always making sure you get sleep, always, as in, your body shows. It's basically a history of what you've done. I didn't go into it thinking that at age 68 that way. I shouldn't say that. I picked up a book in 1971 called LSD, and it was a play at that time on obviously that drug, but it was long, slow distance. I had started running, and this gentleman, he was older than the hills. He was like 62. Anyway, he wrote this book on long, slow distance, and he said, if you do long, slow distance, you'll be able to run well into your 60s. And I remember here I am at 14 years old, and I said, you know what? I want to do that. And I made a concerted effort then saying, I'm going to run in my 60s and beyond. And I'm now 68, and I've been running for that long. I know it sounds weird saying that, but what came along with that is I realized I needed to sleep. I had to eat the right foods because for performances. So it kind of over time, those 6 things developed because I was actually living and feeling it. And I felt my performance going up. I felt my mind acuity was better. I felt everything was just so much better. So I was just setting myself up, for opportunities, basically.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by an Australian philosopher, F.W. Boreham. And and I actually found this from one of my favorite authors, Jack Carr. I don't know if you reading his books, but it's what I do in like my free day time. They completely disconnect. But he wrote a letter to his readers, and he started that his letter to his readers off with this, and it's in essence this. It's from the quote is, "We make our decisions, then our decisions turn around and make us." I love what you're talking about. That these decisions, these simple micro decisions that basically cost you nothing.
Yeah. No, you don't need money for this. Generally, I mean, sometimes with the good food you do because it can be expensive, but really the rest of the stuff is kind of setting yourself up. Ben, I'm here on the 67-acre property because we had that was our non-negotiables, those 6 things. And you had to find a property that you live in that then had that, you know. But again, if you didn't have those, then you're looking for any property, right? You're not really paying attention to these key areas of your life. And I think you're right. It's as if you build a good habit set and then you continue to do the habit set. I can't not go out and run every morning. I don't know how not to do that. I don't know how not to go to bed and sleep 7 hours. I don't know how not to do that. It's in the DNA now. It's hard coded in, but it's the success formula. If people want to know the success formula, and if you're just operating at a high level all the time because your faculties are good, then when things come along, you just have that little bit of edge. Just like I always use Michael Jordan as an example. He was only a little tiny bit different, better than his competitors, but the tiny differences, those core 6 things made all the difference on it. I know when I'm talking, some people say, wow, you looked really passionate about something. I don't even know that's happening. But I got to tell you, if I haven't slept, I haven't done this, I wouldn't be at this level of energy. It would be a much lower level and it would be noticeable. And that's the difference.
It is so true I mean, this is the foundational core of your beingness, which is like accelerating, empowering your becoming. Yeah. I'm really curious, Gary, right? Obviously you have this military like background in education which then you really applied that with heart in your financial service company, which you like grew to like a really, really large, pretty massive company. I'm And you've had a front row seat for like the last 3+ decades to watching people make decisions about health, about wealth, about family. What are the top 3 myths or lies that you have seen people tell themselves that this is what winning looks like, that you have helped them transform?
Yeah, I think the number one to me is people somehow think you have to have some, level of education or some other skill set or something else. It can't happen. There was a study done, and I'm going to forget her name for a moment here, but she's University of Pennsylvania, the one that does happiness studies too. She was trying to figure out what the common denominator was of successful people. So she looked at West Pointers and she said, "Well, what's the common denominator? It wasn't brains, it wasn't brawn, it wasn't their habit set, it wasn't discipline, it wasn't. It was one thing and one thing only." And she wrote a book on it, grit. And people said, "Look, if you want to be successful, the number one thing is grit. You don't have to be good looking. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to even speak well. You have to have grit, and grit will get you over most hurdles because at the end of the day, you'll go and go and go and persevere, and the majority of people will just stop. And that alone will give you success." And I would just use that one alone, quite frankly, because the other myths are somehow some magical event occurs, some luck happens, and people have all these fantastical ideas about how to become wealthy. And I go, just go out there every day, do what you're good at, go at it hard, continue to go at it hard, don't give up, persevere, have grit, and you will gain success at some level. It just depends on other factors then, but you will be successful. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. In this country, because of our strong rule of law and the ability for us to get opportunities. It's not true. I couldn't say grit will get you everywhere in a third world country because they don't necessarily deal by the same rule set that we do. But when I'm talking to people in the United States of America, grit will get you everything you want.
In the Atomic Habit, talking about James Clear, he talks about the 1%, improvement. And I think that everyone goes, "Oh, that makes it so much more quantifiable for me. It makes it so much easier for me." But I think the thing that they're missing is that doing something 1% better every single day requires consistency. And consistency, I think the base foundational ingredient of consistency is grit. Because the idea of just starting off and saving $50 a month, well, that's great. Okay, well, as life happens and you get farther away from that impetus, right? That sort of like, ooh, if I just do this, then I'll be able to do X, Y, Z. The farther away you get from that motivation factor, that willpower moment, the harder it is for you to stay consistent. I'm curious, Gary, how do you define grit?
I think that the grit is really where people pick themselves up by the bootstraps, and they continue to persevere when the odds are against them, when they feel like 2:00 in the morning writing a paper. In the military, what happens a lot that separate people is you're on a ruck march or whatever that's 20 miles, and halfway into it, somebody gets a side stitch, or they start to get blister on their boot in their heel from their boots or whatever, and they start to give up. It's hard at those times to go, just keep going. It will work. You just don't give up, and don't give up. Saying that and having people do that, I think people rise to certain levels of grit. There's the one with "Don't Hurt Me" by Goggins. People talk about that guy's got more grit than anybody I've ever at least heard about. He's got a high level. I think it's it's levels of that, but most people kind of give up at the point when they should keep going. In our world, if you're making cold calls, you don't start to get results until the 6th to 10th call. But most, that, Ben, you and I probably made, I know I did, because I just kept calling. And I remember having a couple of clients that I chased on for 2 or 3 years, and they say, you know why I'm doing business with you? I said, why? Because you've constantly been, after me in a nice way, and you seem like you're going to make it in this business. And I just like the fact that you just won't give up. And it's funny where you get somebody like that. And the point is, I don't know what my level of grit is. It's pretty high, but I think you got to start. I think you got to start exercising at some point in your life, and that doesn't matter when you start. And recognize you kind of have to push through the pain. I remember this incident, and it taught me a lot about physical pain with the body. I'm one of those people that very rarely has to take time off for injuries, and I wouldn't have, do that unless I had figured that out early on. And I was like 15 or 16 years old, and I was on these runs after doing these really. I figured out later what the problem was, but it was heavy exercise I was doing that caused me a lot of abdominal pain in the middle of a run. So I'm in the middle of a 12-mile run, and I just can't seem like I can go any further. So I stop and I walk. And then I go again. And then the next day, same thing. The third day I went, I don't care how much pain there is, I'm not going to stop. And I got through it. It was really painful. And you know what? I did that same little activity that caused this to begin with. Never came back again. And I learned a valuable lesson. I go, it was all here. Yeah, there was some physical manifestation, but this thing started to make it more than it was. And I think when you talk to people, they can't get out of their head. They can't get past that pain threshold or whatever you want to call it, different kinds of pain, to be able to then build the grit level that they need to survive and do well in life. And I was really fortunate. And the reason I bring it up is when I talk to people who are in their 30s and 40s and are starting to have injuries from running, and they look at me and go, do you ever stop running? I said, very rarely. Well, how don't you get? I said, most of it's in your head. And they look at you like, what? I go, no, the majority of it's in your head. Does your body, did you get kind of stress it a little bit? Did too much, whatever? Yeah. All right. Your body can heal really well. Push through it appropriately. Don't run on a broken leg, push through it. And you'll find that your body will naturally heal much quicker that way. If I hadn't learned that when I was 15 years old, I think I'd be like most people today, thinking, oh, I'm injured, I can't do this. I'm injured, I can't do that. And I go, most of that's in your head. And there's several books on this, by the way, experts in this field who will go through that and tell you that a lot of these things we think are real aren't real. And I think grit has a lot to do with it. You're so dumb that you don't know the difference. You keep going, part of it, grit, or you realize that most of the things that stop people won't keep you going. I think I have a little bit of a weird kind of mindset. I've got a runner's weird running gene thing. But I remember I was running in high school as I was trying to do really well. I was so happy when there'd be a major snowstorm or be pouring rain because I'd be out in it running. And I'd say to myself, this is great. No one else is out here. I'm the only one out here. So I'm getting better while they're not getting any better. Now, that takes a weird kind of a mindset, but that's kind of grit related. It's part of the whole thing. I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, I think it does. I think that there's a level of when you turn hard into something that's happy. I mean, I'm thinking back when you're talking about doing cold calls, and I'm thinking back now 22 years, 23 years ago as an intern making cold calls. No one wanted to do it. And I get like these lists and I just would call and call and call. And what ended up happening is that what seemed like a task turned into an experiment on like human behavior for me. And the fact of like being able to hear how someone said hello and then be able to start to like, it almost became like a laboratory, an R&D research project where by the way someone said hello, at what time, was it a man, was it a woman, right? What area was I calling? That it ended up being that it was no longer about like booking the appointment. It was about engaging who the person was on the other side. But what parlayed off of that is that people would maybe get one or two like appointments booked. I would actually get 14 to 18 appointments booked because I stopped making it about actually the appointment booking and turned it into this like really fun, curious, authenticity, genuineness project and journey to be able to engage people and to be able to meet them wherever their feet were at that moment. And I think that in reflection 22 years later, everything that I have done that has brought me incredible, massive amounts, like evergreen amounts of joy, have been preceded by this feeling of, oh man, this is hard. It hurts. You know what? Maybe I should just quit because, whatever the thing that your brain wants to like tell you. But every time that we have just transformed that hard into happy, that suffering into tailwind, I think that, truly, I think if everyone's being really honest with themselves and they look back at where decision points where they kept going and they look back now and people are maybe publicly lauding them, maybe they don't know about it, right? But you're like privately lauding yourself for doing it. It all started with this undying and underlying feeling of grit. How's that land for you, Gary?
Yeah, that was a really smart thing you did with cold calling. I remember doing cold calling. It was hard. It was tough. I mean, there was just, you had to get through it. And the interesting part, to your point, there were 7 of us, they threw up against the wall. There were 7 of us that started this whole thing, cold calling. And after 4 months, I was the only one left. And I either thought, I'm a complete goofball idiot because the rest maybe go on to real jobs, but I really wanted to do what I wanted to do. And then I turned a corner and started really making it, happen. But there were several times, I remember in the parking lot talking to a lady who was kind of, at that point was a secretary, and I said, this is harder than some going through Ranger School. Some of this, at certain points, it's much more difficult. And I go, and I'm finding my way through it and everything. But man, this is hard. Good thing I'm just, like I say, a God doesn't give up, and try to figure out a ways. But you did a really smart thing by focusing on, let me be really curious about this. Let's see who they are and everything else. And I hadn't tried that, but that would have worked better, I think, if I did that part of it. But I got through it. It was just slogging, day after day. I remember making like 100 phone calls a day, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone has an exercise in what it feels like futility looks like or feels like, go do cold calling for a day. And it's right up there with doing concrete work.
Yeah, or jackhammer work.
I think that the imagery I'm getting is the thing that I talk about with my entrepreneur coaching clients is that you are in motion, and they're going to be. It's like I'm a big biker, love to bike, and you as a runner probably have this to the. I don't know to what extent, but wind is a really important factor when you are biking.
Oh, I did triathlon for a while, so I know.
And that you get a headwind, and it feels like maybe what for some of us like inflation feels like, or tariffs feel like. It just feels like this like headwind. But I'm constantly reminded that if you keep biking far enough and long enough, either the road will turn and that headwind will become a side wind, or you'll keep going and all of a sudden that headwind will become a tailwind. That uphill will eventually have a downhill. But the point that I think that you're articulating really clearly, Gary, is just don't stop. And how much does that cost you?
No, it doesn't cost anything. It's like I said, you are getting a blister on your boot. It'll heal. It'll heal. You just keep going. You're paying too much attention to this thing here, and you're not going here. And it's hard for people to get out of their head. It's really hard. And that's why, one of the things, this is a good little segue we're talking about here is, there were people who could not make it at West Point for one thing and one thing alone. And that is every single person that goes through the academy, and we have some unbelievably high performing people, will fail at something. And for many people, it's the first time in their life. They've never failed. And that's when you see who they are. And what I found was the people who had never failed before had an unbelievably difficult time. They could not understand how this is happening. How could this possibly be? Because they never had failed. And you felt sorry for them in a way that they hadn't learned this earlier before the age of 18 or 19. But what you really realized was, hey, today's not my day. And then all your buddies would be talking to you, holding you up, pushing you on. Don't give up. Keep rolling. Keep going. And you knew because just yesterday you were doing it with somebody else. And so it does take many times other people outside sources, the folks you hang with who go, hey, when you're hurting, I'm going to be there for you. You had a lot of people for you, Ben, for the good couple months you were dealing with Benji. That was, yeah, that makes the difference. That gets you through. Isolation is actually worse than co-calling. I mean, isolation from the world. And so what happens at West Point is you learn that, hey, if my buddies aren't there for me and I'm not there for them, we don't make it. We don't make it through. We don't, period, do not make it through. We do not graduate. That's, for many people who are high performers, that's a really tough lesson to learn. They can't believe how that possibly could happen. I go, well, you push yourself enough in enough areas, you're not Superman or Superwoman. You're going to have to depend on others, and you're going to have to be grateful for it, and you're going to have to thank God for it, and you're going to have to be humble about it. And then you, and likewise, will be doing the same thing for somebody else when they need you. And this goes in all areas of life. I don't care where it's at. We see it with entrepreneurs when we're at Strategic Coach. We see that somebody comes in a bad way at one of the quarterly meetings, and everybody's helping them through because they've been there and they know. And that just says, hey, I'm being really tested right now. My grits, I'm barely holding on. So it's great that others can be there to support you.
Gary, did you ever watch Band of Brothers?
Yes.
There's the point at the end of the series that, where the German officer is talking to his, his platoon, or I'm not using appropriate military language, but, and it harkens back to the man in the arena, right? In terms of like that you were in the arena, and the fact that like, we've served together, we band of brothers, right? This poignant moment. And I think that so often people want to avoid the hard stuff. They want to avoid the hard stuff because they feel like that's actually what feels good. But I have to tell you that the greatest joys in my life have been in the hard stuff, being in the arena, this common bond, this connection, this camaraderie, and gratitude. I think that gratitude is born. It's the phoenix that's born from these things that other people would go, well, did you learn your lesson? And I think it's the lesson that is actually the real fascinating part of it.
Yes, absolutely. And the older and older I get, I realize more and more I know very little. There's very few things I know. And I kind of knew that as I was going along, but as you continue in life, you realize it's even much, much less than you thought earlier. And it's so funny because it is a very humbling experience, but it's a very good experience because now, I can be there for these younger folks who are going through the same thing I went through 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, and help them see the way through to where their successes are going to be, where they lie. But it's, I keep putting myself in those arenas like you talk about, because I find it's the only way that I end up growing. You have to be tempered by steel. It's like steel being tempered. You have to constantly put yourself out there doing something new and different every day, to continue to grow and develop yourself. Now that's if you want to do that. And like I said, I have these heart diseases, and every day, I mean, one of them is where literally my heart can just stop and you can't restart. It doesn't matter. I'm done. When you know that, you go, well, okay, that's fine. So I'm just going to keep making every day count going forward. And guess what? I'm definitely putting myself in those hard positions. So when I go out and run at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's really hard. I've already done something really difficult every single day, first thing. And I think it kind of makes the rest of the day go along at a high level by doing that. And I encourage people to do that. And there are a lot of successful people. They do something really hard first thing in the morning. I've seen this pattern over and over again. It, but I embrace it. To me, it's like that is life, guys. Everything is hard. There's no easy part of life, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying that get it, embrace it, become what it is, and recognize this is the way it is. It's just how life works.
Yeah. One of the things you said there about being humbled made me think, Gary, and I'm curious to see how this lands with you. Is humbled or humbleness or being humbled or the act of being humbled, is that the one of the origin ingredients of being?
According to the being. I think so. I mean, Dante's Inferno, you know, they go through the stages. Humility is number one. Ben Franklin, I just saw this morning, his 13 principles, whatever. His 13th principle was humility. Ben Franklin. I find, and you're going to laugh at this, I have a book I read on humility. I've been reading it now for 3 years. I go back and reread it. Because for me, anyway, I feel like the thing that will end up helping me to continue to grow and develop is to become more and more humble. It's the number one attribute that will, if you take these 6 items, if I put humility there, and it sounds funny saying that, I know, because people always say, well, being humble, they always look at it as a negative. I said, no, humility, put in the right place, it will make you look at everything like you were doing a cold calling. Curiosity, freshness. I don't know what's going on. This person in front of me probably knows a lot more than I do, and it's probably true, and so forth and so on. And it makes you, I think it makes your outlook on everything much different. And the funny thing about humility, and this is the joke all the time, if you try to be humble, you can't. If you try to read about humility, you can't. If you try to understand humility, you won't. It's a being. It's not something you can manufacture, but it's kind of like any philosophy. You're going to dig around the edges of it to try to help you stay in that mode, but it's like, it's very fleeting. It's very hard to do that. So if you're saying I'm being humble, that means the opposite, because that's not the definition of humility. So to me, it's very strange. So what I do is I read about it, because then the reading allows me to see how others are doing this and how they recognize in their life and so forth. Then I want it to happen automatically, because you can't really manufacture it. It's got to kind of be there every day and throughout the day.
Yeah. So what's the book that you're reading?
And so it's Humility of the Heart by Father, I'm not going to say his name right, Kajetan Mary di Bergamo. He lived in the 17th century. I keep reading it because it's just full of really, really well done stuff. So it's called Humility of the Heart.
Humility of the Heart. What are the top 3 things you take from there that you think that our listeners who go, you know what, I love the idea of reading it, but I'm probably not going to read it. If you were to narrow it down, here are the 3 things that you can take.
Every saint had one thing in common: humility. Now let that sit for a little bit. That's nothing else. The only thing they had in common was humility, because to believe in Christ and to follow Christ's life and to do everything that, dying on the cross, so forth. I mean, you've got to have a lot of humility, because you're taking everything related to us as human beings and setting it aside as a human person and saying, no, it's not about me. It's not about my person. It's about living a life like Christ. And so I'm going to try to be humble in the process of doing that. Not many people can get there. And to me, actually, that's the number one. Everything else in there is all pointing at how various people have done that, and how this particular author walks through and spent this whole life writing on humility, as it turns out, and understanding that. It goes through and explains it from a lot of different lenses, looking at humility from lots of different places. But the key was that if you want to know how that actually worked with other people who have lived. It's the saints who actually had that one thing in common. Not if that helps, but that would help me.
I think it does. And if humility is, I really love cooking, so a lot of my analogies come from cooking. But if humility is truly one of like the mother sauces, or like all really good. If you're a sauce person, right? Like all the really good sauces come from these mother sauces. I think about, you said it makes you curious. It makes you like genuine. It makes you not being the smartest person in the room, which like right like, and I think all these things are also core ingredients of like relationships. I think about communities. I think about like the networks, the tribes that you are building. And I'd love to transition this conversation to talking about what you're currently working on right now, which I think is something that is completely different. I don't hear a whole lot of people talking about it, but it is something that is starting to happen, especially as AI, right? If we take away all the tasks, what are we left with? Right? Our humanness, our beingness, our relationships, and our heart. I'd love, Gary, if you would talk a little bit about how you came to create and think about this multi-generational coined term of family village.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for bringing it up. But I'm going to go back to 1991 because, like you, we were working with a client and we were doing some estate planning work. And because the children were going to be in this meeting, it had to happen on a Saturday. So we're in my office on a Saturday, sign all the documentation, and I'm driving home. And I have this really bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. Like, I don't know why I'm having this bad feeling. And I thought first of my wife, no, nothing's wrong there. My kids, nothing wrong there. Other family members. And then it hit me like a blast. I mean, literally blast. I almost physically wanted to turn the wheel around in my car, go back to the office and tear up all the documents. You say, why would you want to do that? Because I had met the children at that time and the parents, and I realized that they were neophytes with money. And if they got this money, it would destroy them. I just knew that I just saved my client another $2 million, so they were each going to get $1 million more, and it would just burn their house down faster. I'm talking about the physical house. It so revolted me that I said, I literally had that epiphany of, well, what am I in this business for? Am I in this business to make money with investment management, money management, fees here, fees there, whatever commissions we had at the time? I said, am I in the business to make a substantive change in the lives of my clients? And I said, I'm in the business to help my clients realize their dream. And those parents wanted their children to be better off than them. My part of that role was to make sure that money didn't destroy them. And in fact, that the money would make them better than their parents, that they would even be more prudent with the money than their parents were. And I decided at that time, okay, I'm going to try to figure this out. And it took me about a decade, and I came up with lots of techniques, different ways to bring in the generations, second, third, even fourth generations into the equation over time, so that by the time the parents died, that the next generation was totally prepared to have the money. It would not change their lives. If anything, it would enhance everything else out there. And that made me really happy. I mean, it made me want to do this business for the rest of my life. That was a core, knowing that now you understand why this Holy Family Village thing. That was so core to me that I wanted to do. So when I was in my late 50s and I kind of realized one day that I had finished all my life goals and I wanted to then look at some more goals. And I spent a year, believe it or not, writing and rewriting narratives about what I wanted to do next. And one of the narratives was how do I reform my family in a way where we're together more? So not only I was already doing the money thing with my kids, but not only that, but all the other parts of who we are were passed along. Everything. We live back in communities like they did several hundred years ago, which were much more constructive, much better for society, much better for families, all sorts of, we wonder about all the problems with families. So that stuff didn't exist in many ways because of the fact that families are so well connected. And that was 10 years ago. And then basically 5 years ago, We were able to find this property. We had a bunch of non-negotiables, like I was talking about the 6 things. There was other non-negotiables. It was my daughter and myself and my wife and my grandson and my son-in-law who were doing this initially. As soon as we got the property, my father and mother-in-law said, we want to live with you. Within a year and a half after that, my brother and sister-in-law said they want to live with you. A year after that, another brother and sister-in-law said they want to live with you. And now there's 5 families here. It is so unbelievably attractive to people. If you set this up where it's about that truth of passing along all the wealth, the whole family wealth, the money that supports everything, but who you're about, the grit we talk about, the stuff that we've become, who we've become, and who we've been able to do. One of the key non-negotiables, and everybody in this property knows this about me, and if it goes away, I'll be not a happy camper, that everyone who comes here should be able to pursue their purpose in life, whatever that is. And we will provide them with the support, the resources, the money, whatever's necessary so they can pursue what God put them on the earth to do. I said, that has to be here. That's a non-negotiable. That is the key. That is the reason we're here. That's who we are. And that was really key. So all I did unknowingly really was took this multi-generational living that started with this story in 1991, and just now I'm living this myself and helping others do this to reform families and family groups that make sense to allow them to fulfill their purpose in life. It's very attractive. We didn't ask these other family members to come. They wanted to come, and they had to move from 700 miles away. It wasn't like they were down the street or anything. So it's, I don't know what to tell you, but I got to tell you that reforming families, the way families are meant to be, those who get that really want that. They want that massively. And now I'm, like I said to you earlier in the green room, it's like I don't know what part of my life is business, what part of my life is life, because it's all blending together. But then I realize, God, look what God has done for me. He's allowed me to fulfill my purpose 24/7, not just at work, but it's at home. And not only that, I'm turned out to be the cultural authority in my family village. And that's kind of like the key holder to who this family is all about, and that you will have no agenda whatsoever, and you will do anything for any person on this property to make sure they fulfill what they're doing. And they all know that. And they, it kind of blows me away a little bit, Ben, because here's Gary, who's this broken person, and here's this cultural authority, this spirit, or we're going to call it, who they're following, because they're not following me, because I'm a goofball, but they're following that. They're actually following that. And it's special only because we don't know what this is. We have lost this institutional knowledge of what it was like hundreds of years ago with families, and we're rediscovering it right now. And I got to tell you, it's great.
What are you finding in that research and that rediscovery? What does it mean to be family in the extent that it has been into what you are now discovering? Obviously, every family version of this definition is going to be a little different, right? A little different take on it, a little different flair, a little different flavor. But what are you finding in this discovery process, exploration of family?
Well, for us, it's a very painful process of putting people together. It is very painful.
Yeah, say more.
Well, it's just you're going. I use Dunbar's number. You probably remember that. It's we can keep track of 150 relationships, human beings, which actually ends up being 11,150 different combinations of people. It's a huge amount. So if you look at a little nuclear family of 4 people, there's 6 relationships. If you look at total, if you say we're going to put 3 of those together, so there's 12 people. That's 3 times as many people. So it can't be that much more. Well, guess what? It's 66 relationships. So you go from 6 to 66. You've gone 10 times. So you have 10 times the possible issues. And you got 60 somethings who've been living as a nuclear family their whole life, and now they got to come back and they got to, oh, you do that and I do this, and so I got to be aware of what's going on with you over here on the property there and that. Oh, and then we're having meals together, and I kind of like that. I don't, da da da. Just all sorts of interaction going on. Like today I saw my daughter walking through. I saw my grandson went off to school. My sister-in-law came over. I borrowed her car. My father-in-law said hello to him when he got up this morning. I mean, this is just this morning, there's a lot of stuff going on. And people are going to get they're going to get riled up because it's not the way it was when they were on their own nuclear family. But with that, they want this because they realize that this has much, much more benefit to them. And it's also feels right, what's going on here with family being together. But I got to tell you, it's a tough process. It's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to the grit factor, right? Someone's listening to this and they're going, man, okay, I can buy into this idea of like, you know what, that there's some benefit in recreating what families are. But what's on the other side, right? You go through the hard. You go through if you want to call it the rewilding.
Yeah, well, that's a good term.
Rewilding of your familial relationships. What's on the other side?
Well, what's on the other side is those things, like I said, where a family member couldn't pursue their purpose because just regular stuff, money, support, facilities, you name it, right? Because Ben, you and I were fortunate. We went into an industry that pays very well. I have to remember that. Again, humility. I could have gone into another industry. It doesn't pay well. And you have a limit as to what you can do monetarily on that. So when you look around, we both know him, Lee Brower. But one of the things I learned from Lee, which is very, very appropriate on our property, is there's nothing more unequal than treating unequals equally. There's nothing more unequal than treating unequals equally. It's, that it's the biggest issue you'll have with your clients when they're trying to go, and I got 3 kids, I'm trying to treat them equally. You're trying to help them go, but you can't treat them equally because they're unequals. And so you're trying to monetarily treat them equally or otherwise treat them equally. It's Aristotle has a thing that he calls, one of his primary ones, called distributive justice. And it basically says, look, you have to give unto each person what they are. These unequals to make them equal, if you're looking at it that way. So what you find is hard to get others to understand that. Like, oh, well, so-and-so's doing something. Why are they spending their money on that? How come we're supporting them this way? How come, so then you kind of have to walk them through and go, well, because they can't afford it. And they live here. And this is about their purpose, and this is part of who they are. And as they walk through all of that, and you think about the shit of justice, and you think about what our core of who we are, people slowly come around and go, okay, I see that now. Because again, you're trying to reform a family that would have just happened automatically as people grew up together. They would have seen all of that. And now you're trying to reform around those kinds of things. And we have funny, as you know, people have funny things about money. The way they think about money should be spent, how it should be distributed, how it should be used. People use it for power, they use it for control, all these bad things. And everybody's got some dysfunction around money. And when you're in a place like this, it costs a lot of money to run this place. And so you're going to have some dysfunction around money until people get comfortable with how that works. That's just one aspect, besides all the family relationships of the 66 versus 6 situation. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So those who are listening to this go, I love this idea of these deep connections and continuing to keep those connections well beyond when your kids leave the home, right? And that rather than that being the end, that becomes the beginning, or that becomes the end of the beginning, right? is what are the three things that you think that people can be doing? So maybe they don't want to necessarily move in with like their brother-in-law and their mother-in-law, right? And all those other different things. But what are the three things that you've noticed in having this true real life R&D laboratory on your 67 acres?
Good question. Um, it just took me a little bit to understand, and I finally, after I was here 2 years, I went, oh, I didn't see that. And I'll give you the example. You have your children, you raise them. Maybe they go to University of Wisconsin, Madison, good school right down the road from where you live. And then they make a phone call to mom and dad, really excited. Hey, I got a job in New York City that pays really well versus the job in Milwaukee, which is, or Madison or Wausau, whatever, which pays a lot less. So I'm taking that job. I'm really excited about moving forward. And then you say to them, and I'm changing the script here. You say, so son or daughter, you basically made a decision of money over family. And they look at you and say, what do you mean? Well, since they pay more money in New York City, you're going to not be close to family. You're making a decision, a money decision that says I'll be away from family over a family decision. I'll be close to family. Prior to the last couple of years, I would think that was okay. What I've realized after living here is it's not okay. That's really what's going on. And you can take it further. Now they're in New York City and they don't realize it costs a lot of money to live there. So now they got to get in a little tiny little apartment, or they got to go find somebody to get in an apartment. And then maybe they get married and they're trying to make ends meet and they both have to work. And now someone else has to raise the children. And I'm not making judgment calls here. I'm saying this is reality. And they don't want that. They'd rather have somebody staying home most of the time to raise the child, but they don't have a choice because they select New York City. It's a series of decisions that says nuclear families doing our own thing with our own thing is the way of the future. And my point is, no, that was really it was a fundamental shift that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s of housing. It was a housing issue. And you said, what are you talking about? Well, they came off the farms because mechanization came in and now they couldn't compete. They couldn't live on the farm anymore. They came into the city and they go live in one of the tenements. And the landlord goes, no. You and your 14 people don't live in one tenement. You got to split up. And they split up by family units. And that started really what we see today. What we accept is normal. What we believe is right. I didn't come to this realization until a couple of years ago after being here for a few years and realized it's not right. What Johnny is saying to me when he goes off to pick his job in New York City is that money here is more important than the family. Doesn't realize it, but we're condoning it, saying, yeah, that's true. Now you got to go off because you got to be a nuclear family and you got to go do your own thing. And we just had my 3 grandchildren and my son and daughter here. And the class is going to happen. My wife happens every single time. She has 24 hours where she's just really feels heartsick. When they leave, they've been here for 4 days. Heartsick. Why is she heartsick? Oh, she's just that way. No, she's heartsick because there's separation, and separation is not normal. This is not how human beings live. This is not normal living. This is nuclear family living. She's heartsick because that's the natural response to being separated again from your 3 grandchildren, your son and your daughter-in-law that have been with us for 4 days. That happens to almost every parent, grandparent throughout this country on a daily basis, and we think that's okay. It's not okay. Now, I'm being pretty blunt here about this, but what I'm saying is we got to get off this whole thing of nuclear families is a normal way of living. It is not. You just mentioned to me about your sister living with your parents and 3 generations for a number of years. I didn't get to ask her in depth about this kind of conversation about what it was like there versus not. But my bet that is a lot of that was felt very good relative to being separated from them. I don't know, maybe they're in the same town. It won't make that big of a difference. I don't know. But the point is, when they're away and they're 700 miles away from us, yeah, you don't feel good about it. And you're counting the days till you can see them again, kind of thing.
Yeah. So Gary, I'm imagining someone who's listening to this is going, okay, like we've all been taught, like you go to school. Why do you go to school? So that then you can maybe go on and do more schooling. Why do you do more schooling? So that then you can go on and get a really good job. Why do you get a really good job? So that you can make some money. Why do you make some money? So that you actually can create like a home for like your family, right? I mean, this is sort of the rinse and repeat recipe that we've all been.
Absolutely. I bought into it 100%.
Yeah. So what do you say to someone who's listening to this going, well, that's really good, Gary. You know, you've created this incredible life with the financials and like the impact you've created that have allowed people to write you bigger and bigger checks over time, that you can do this. And that seems like a castle on the hill to me. How would you respond to them now in terms of like, how would you want that conversation to go when someone is having the conversation of, hey, this is the trajectory of like, you could go to college and right, and then you can get a job. How would you retransform that whole conversation in a way that allows people to go do the thing that you're put here on earth to do, have the opportunity to build your own financial wealth and your own castle while maintaining this family village connection?
Great point. It's kind of like, I remember the story about drones. And so they said, all of a sudden there's drones everywhere. Why is there drones everywhere? Well, they needed 4 things. And the 4th thing just came up. And I think it was the GoPro that actually was the 4th thing. They needed gyroscopes, GoPro, weight, electrical source, and GPS is what they needed. When they finally got the GoPro camera small enough for the weight ratio, they took off. And you go, but before that, no drones. COVID, Zoom, what we're on right now, it made it so families could do what I just said. It is a piece that's why we basically did this in 2020 is, whoa, we can now do this and be together as a family rather than having to be in the big city to get for the job that I went through college for, blah, 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 blah. This is a fundamental shift that is allowing people to get together because they can do remote work. And they don't have to be at a location. Now, it doesn't work everywhere. I understand that. But it's certainly there's certainly a greater percentage of the population, probably at least a quarter of the population that can do this because of that. Well, now let's look at what had happened prior to it. Because of now doing this more and more, I'm finding more and more stories from people. I interview people on how they do this. And one of the common things is you'll find, oh yeah, our family does that. Well, how do you do it? Well, mom and dad live in that house on the street. My sister's 1 house over. My brother is 2 houses the other way. I'm trying to get the guy in between to sell the house to me. And so I can live there. And then another one's a block away. What are they doing? Why are they doing that? Because they want to be together and they can't necessarily figure out a way to go buy a place where they can put all the properties together on it, but they're still doing that by being next door to each other. I see that one over and over again. That's pretty common. The other one I see is like what your sister was saying, where you have aging parents who maybe not have the financial wherewithal, or maybe they have other issues, they need support, and they move in together in a in-law suite or a regular suite, and in a bigger house, and then they have 3 or even 4 generations, taking place. To see that situation now, and maybe now your sister or someone else can be there because they can do remote work, and now they can be with the parents who don't want to leave, Wausau, Wisconsin, or whatever it happens to be, right? So you can do that. You're seeing on family farms, it's been forever on family farms. You go by any family farm that's still operating as a family farm, you'll see the big house. That's where the adult children with the grandchildren live and work the farm. There's a smaller house next door. That's where grandma and grandpa live. And there's a little tinier house where great grandma and great grandpa live. And it just rotates through. So they've been doing this thing because of the business being farming for a long time. I can keep going. People are trying to work out ways to do this, to make it work. But I think you're going to have a more and more bigger trend because that last piece of the drone came in, and that was remote work because of the ability to use these kinds of services like Zoom and other services to be able to do that work remotely, not having to be at another city and away from your family.
So again, continue to driving this down. Bottom line, if people buy in and go, you know what, you're right. Like Zoom has opened up. I mean, I will say like COVID was one of the most advantageous things for all of my businesses because I was no longer restricted to geographic location to find really incredible human beings who brought incredible like brains and talent to bear. And so what would you say the bottom line is if you execute this and you start to build this into your life, right? They read your book, which I want you to talk about next. If they read this and they start bringing this into their life, what's the return on intention? Like, what's the ROI on bringing some of this in that you've seen and what you expect is going to compound?
My father-in-law, who's directly below me, 90 years old, and my mother-in-law, she passed about a year and a half ago, moved here 4 years ago. He's a tough old Yankee. I mean, grew up in Connecticut, but he's got that old Yankee kind of mentality. You don't show your feelings, you don't say anything, blah, blah, blah. But every 6 months or so, and I'll walk by or I'll sit with him, he'll turn to me and I'll go, "You're doing a really good thing here, Gary." That's the difference. And it makes me tear up because you realize that you weren't looking for that. You thought that this would work well. And then you have someone who would rarely say anything, and they basically say, "This is really good." He has his 3 adult daughters here. They're all different. They do different things with him every day. My wife takes him to his doctor's appointments. My other sister-in-law plays Scrabble with him. The other sister-in-law watches some shows with him and takes him out places. He knows he is so fortunate in his life. He could live a long time because he has so much support and so much connectivity. There'd normally be isolation for him back in Virginia Beach by himself in some, assisted living facility. You can't. There's no way you can. There's not enough money to do that. There's no money that you could put somebody in a $50,000 a month, penthouse facility, but they don't have family around. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
it doesn't. So I just want to give you that example. I don't know how else to explain that. And my grandson, who's 7 years old, he's getting this benefit from all these adults who do different things with him. He's got kids coming on the property. We have a pond. We bring his family groups out here to have picnics with them. And, everything is just, it's kind of a constant. We have a guest showed up today. We had guests leave 2 days ago. We had guests a week ago. We have somebody here, family member or guests, almost every week now. And people don't want to leave. And they don't want to leave because the environment is so peaceful, comfortable. They just see us get together for dinner all the time. Just make it like my father-in-law told me yesterday. I know I got to get ready. He goes, "Hey, we're going to go over to Jen's tonight, cook out some steaks if you want to do that with us. And we're going to eat some." And I go, "Oh, yeah, okay." It's just because we all have different houses and we just walk. She's 200 yards that way, and my daughter's about 100 yards that way. And my other sister-in-law is about 50 yards that way, I don't know how to explain it other than it's kind of, you just live this stuff every day, and it's not for everybody. I realize some people rather have their be private, be with themselves, not have everybody else around. But for the majority of people, living this way has a lot of benefits that I can't explain other than what happens on an ongoing basis every day.
Yeah. The imagery I just got, Gary, was in essence what you just articulated is a living obituary. And you read obituaries when people die, it's not like, and they transformed this company and, they had literally like these incredible stock options and they were able to retire 15 years early. They might say, and they were able to retire, because of his success or her success in business, they were retired 15 years earlier so that they could relationship, relationship, relationship.
Yeah. Well, it's a reason in coach, the most powerful tool we have is called the R factor question. That's why.
You wrote a book. If people want to know more about this, can you talk a little bit about your book and where they can find that?
Sure. So I think maybe a week after we moved in here, I'm in a coach session and somebody said, well, they always knew, we're all doing something different all the time. What are you doing now? Oh, I'm on this family compound is what I called it then. And I remember one of them said, I want to do that. How do I do that? There's a lot of moving parts and everything else. And then over the next 2 months, I ran into probably a dozen people who said the same thing. Entrepreneurs who do have the freedoms that we know of time, money, relationship, and purpose, right? They were able to do that. And I realized, I go, this is a lot more attractive to people than I thought. I thought maybe we're the odd family, doing this, but there's a lot of people who want to do this. I thought, it was really hard. It took me 4 years and it was really difficult to do. I said, I'm really good at systems and processes. That's my thing. I'm really good at. I'm going to just write a book about how to go through this process. How do you go from nothing to being on the property and do it in the manner that works really well for your family? So I wrote the book, came out last year, and this is it. It's Multi-Generational Living, and the subtitle is The Proven Guide to Creating Stronger Families and Smarter Finances Through Intentionally Designed Shared Spaces. And it's on all the media out there. You can also get it on Kindle, and it's on Audible and so forth. So anywhere you want to go out and buy this book, you can get it.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. And Gary, just in general, if people want to know more about you, I know you talked about you have workshops, right? I mean, this isn't just something you wrote about, but this is something that you are actively doing on a weekly basis, bringing people in, having workshops where people can actually learn how to do this. It's not just from a relational standpoint, but there are some massive tax benefits. There are some massive wealth building opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to think outside the box a bit, right? So with a property like this, you can do many different things. You can do different kinds of farming or hobby farming kind of stuff. We have horses. That my sister-in-law loves horses, so she's got her horses here she's working with. We've got my daughter got pigs that are basically family pigs. They're more pets. And we have a chicken palace I'm looking at that we put up recently for our chickens. So we get, 20 or eggs or so a day, and then we spread them around the family village. But you can set up a separate LLC to run your businesses through here. You can get egg exemptions. You can, because we have all the 67 acres in the land and all the facilities, we've been making furniture. I do wood sales. I process wood. My thing is I love the wood. So I cut down dead and dying trees. I bring a wood processor out. I cut them into dimensional lumber. And I've built fences, run-in sheds, bridges, a bunch of other stuff. This is all from my property. So I didn't buy anything from the store other than and screws and so forth. But that's my purpose, the thing I like doing outside of this, my fun part on it. But we have a capability of doing that, capability of doing a lot more than what I just said. Because we have 4 ponds, we have 3 streams, we've got the fields, we've got the forests. We can do hunting here, fishing here. We got a lot of. We were very fortunate to find this property because it offers a ton of capability for anybody who wants to be here.
So Gary, where do people, if they want to know more about you, like what are your socials? Like where can they follow more things?
Yeah, so at coil.com is where my main company is. You can find it there. Gary at coil.com is my email, but coil.com is our website. And then there's links to other everything out of there. And I'm on LinkedIn, and they've got, I don't know what a socials on. I don't do any of it. Everybody does that for me. I'm more of a voyeur. It's like I catch up with stuff on you. I look at, LinkedIn and.
Yeah, so just for the audience, we'll put some links in the description for Gary if you want to know more about this. He has some like ongoing workshops that he has going that you can actually come out to his property and learn more about it, and then giving links to where you can find more about it. But Gary, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing so generously about just some of your experiences with your health, and I think just a really incredible conversation around grit, humility, and I thought it was just a really great way for us to end it, because at the end of the day, when you die, it's not about how much money you have. It's not about in terms of your titles. It really comes back down to this thing: your relationships that you have, the relationships you foster, and the relationships that ripple on as a result of your principles and values. So, Gary, I always like my guests to leave our audience with a last word or phrase or thought. So what do you want our audience to walk away from this conversation today?
A lot of people think you have to have a lot of money to do what we're doing here in our family village. And I don't see that. I've seen families, regular folks are able to do this by taking all the resources together and that's one of the misnomers. Like, oh, you need to have a ton of money to be able to do what we're doing. You don't. You can actually get together as a group if you want to and use all your resources. And because, you consolidate everything, it's less expensive overall many times to do that. So don't realize you can, if you want, to put your own family village together, however you want to do that. It's out there. And remote work obviously makes that a lot easier to do that. So do it. And then the only other one is all my success is because I basically have always found a good mentor. You and I both have Dan Sullivan as a mentor. But throughout my entire life, I've had 5 or 6 mentors who, without them, I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't get to where I'm at. But I understood that if I wanted to do well in any field, I would find somebody who was really an expert in that field. And I would just do what they tell me to do. And that's how, and then having the grit, obviously, to make it through. But I think we lack that a lot in society today. I keep thinking, well, I've got to do it on my own. No, you actually don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can go out and get yourself a really good mentor and just do what they tell you to do. And you'll have success.
That's amazing. Gary, thank you so much for being here. And I'm looking forward for the audience to listen to this episode.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.